Hello, and welcome to episode 38 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop and knitting school here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is February 3rd, 2020. Today I'm wearing a shawl that was first published as a mystery knit-along designed by Susanna IC. And as usual, I went for the option with beads and I chose a yarn that's called Drops Lace, and it's 70% alpaca and 30% silk. And I love it. It's very thin and light, and that's another reason I love to have beads in the shawl, so it gets a little bit of weight and it just drapes nicer, I think, that way. So you can see all those little beads, and it's a bit difficult to show the lace pattern because it's so airy and thin. But I think you can see what it looks like. It's fairly big and I love it. So that's the shawl, and the jacket I'm wearing, that's something special again. I forgot to bring the magazine where I've got the pattern from, but I link to my Ravelry page underneath the video, so you can click on the link and look on my Ravelry page, and I always link to the original pattern, and I show which yarn I used and how much I used and what kind of needle I used. And nowadays I also put how long I've knit on something. I didn't always back when I started using Ravelry. Yeah, but you can check those things out there. So the jacket was knit with Noro yarn. Noro is a Japanese yarn dyer who loves to put lots and lots of colors together. And it's usually quite expensive, and I only made the jacket because I got the yarn in an offer when it was cheaper. And originally it was supposed to be a short sleeve jacket that wasn't very long, and I knit the first sleeve as a gauge swatch, and I measured it and I thought I had gauge. I thought it was okay and the jacket would come out the way it was planned. So I did both sleeves about this length. And then I started with the front and back. And because when I started knitting, all the stitches were bunched up on the needle, and it was the back and front, the fronts all on one needle. So I assumed it had to look kind of big, and I kept knitting and knitting. And after a while, I realized it was getting way too big. But I'd already knit so much that I didn't want to undo everything. So I said, well, if it's too wide, I'll just make it longer. I had enough yarn, so I decided to make it longer, and it got longer and longer. And then at some point I thought it doesn't really make sense to have a long and wide jacket with short sleeves. So I kept knitting on the sleeves, and I made 2 long sleeves. And then when I got to a point, at some point I changed the needle size, I think, to bring it in a bit, and then there's some decreases when it goes from the pattern to stockinette stitch, and I made sure it fits round here, and I knew the sleeves fit. And then this bit I improvised. In the pattern you were supposed to knit the fronts and the sleeves and the back in pieces and then sew everything together so that the colors mix in a different way, but I didn't want to do that, so I put everything on one needle and I finished the whole thing in one go. But I didn't really plan the decreases out perfectly, so I've got a bit of a funny corner here and here, but I don't mind. I didn't want to undo it again, so I left it that way. And I'll just quickly show you how long the jacket is now, and I'll climb on my chair. So this is how long it is. And you can see how wide it is, so it wouldn't have made sense to make it as a short jacket. And I really love the way it looks now. And because of the many colors, the pattern comes out really nicely. And yep, I like this jacket a lot. Oops. And there we go. Yep, so that's what I'm wearing today. Now on to finished objects. The first finished object I'm showing you today is these crocheted cushion tops or covers that I helped finish. So this is the first one that I was shown that was completely finished, so I did nothing on this one. So this is the sample that she gave to me, the only one that was already done completely. And then there was another one with a white border that was almost finished. So 8 of the 9 squares had already been attached, but so I only needed to attach the last square and crochet the edge. And it took me a bit of trying to figure out how the pattern works, because I didn't get any instructions. And but it's not exactly the same, but it's close enough, I think, that she won't mind. It looks almost the same. So I finished that first, and then I had 17 motifs, 17 squares that I was given, and they were supposed to be put together to make more cushion covers, tops, whatever. So I attached all the squares together, I crocheted the border around, and with the last one there was one square missing. So this is the square that I crocheted, and I used a very simple pattern just to make sure it sort of fits with the others. And then I had to do all the borders around the squares and attach them, and then do the edging around as well. And yeah, and I finished it. So they're all done now. I've washed them, blocked them very lightly, and then tomorrow I'm going to call the customer and tell her that it's done and she can come and pick it up. So that was in a way the biggest finished object, even though I didn't do all of the work on them. Then the next thing I finished is my crazy socks. This is a DK weight sock yarn by Opal, and they started producing neon colors last year, and that was the first project that I used them with. So the green and the yellow are these neon colors, and then the red and the colorful bit, that's one of the rainforest colors that you can buy either as a 4-ply or as a DK weight. And yeah, it's a bit crazy. I didn't really think it through when I picked the colors. So I didn't really think about what the blue and the green would look like together, but I didn't mind too much. And because most of the color is in the heel anyway, I think they're quite funny and I like them. And they'll keep me warm. So that's the most important bit about it. Then I finished the wrist warmers that I'm knitting for a friend. They're very simple, just a 2x2 rib and then a lace pattern that I made up. I think is it called Feather and Fan? It's basically what I did. It's just a bit smaller than the way you usually do it. Yeah, so they're done. That's a DK weight merino yarn by Schachenmeier. It's called Merino Extra Fine 120. Yep. And I also finished the wrist warmers that I sort of made up myself. I have a pattern for gloves with, they're called half gloves. So you knit fingers, but you only knit like half a finger. And so they're open and the thumb is basically like this. But with the pattern that I have, everything is in rib. And I decided to do the thumb increases in garter stitch because I think it looks nicer. And I just knit them as wrist warmers or I don't know, how do you call them? Open mittens or something. So without the finger, so it's a lot easier to knit and still they keep you just as warm, I think. And you can knit them as long as you want. You can knit them longer, you can fold them down. So there's lots of things you can do. Yeah, and I'm going to write down the instructions, and I've decided to call the pattern Friederike, which is a German name, and it's the name of my great-grandmother. And the book with the instructions for the gloves that I sort of got these from used to belong to her. So that's why the pattern will be called Friederike. Yeah, so that's all the finished objects. Now I'll show you what I worked on during the last week. I am knitting, I didn't show these last week. I'm knitting 2 pairs of stockings, knee-high socks, whatever you call them. They're knitted with 2 threads of yarn at the same time. And with this one, I used a colorful yarn that's pink and blue. And then I used this color as the second color. But for the ribbing, I used the colorful yarn held double, and then 1 colorful and 1 gray. And then for the heel and the toe, I doubled the gray yarn. And it's for a pair of sisters. So this is for one of the sisters, and the other sister will get this color, also mixed with this one. Same thing, the blue yarn is held double in the ribbing, and then it's 1 of the blue and 1 of the gray. And then the heel is the gray held double. And I've almost finished knitting the foot, and then now all I need to do is knit the toe with the gray yarn held double, and then I need to knit the second one of each pair. So one of the things that slowed me down is figuring out exactly how long to knit the leg and the foot. So now that that's done or almost done, I hope the second one will be a bit quicker. So that's one thing. And then the other sock I'm knitting on, I think it's also one that I didn't show last week. This is hand-dyed yarn by a company called Wolldackel. And I started knitting that sock, I think 2 weeks ago. And at first I meant to do a very simple sock without a pattern. But because of the nice spiraling going on, I decided to knit the gray stitches in garter stitch and the orange ones in stockinette stitch. And a few days ago, I decided that this was long enough for my leg, and I put in some waste yarn in blue, and this is where I want to knit an afterthought heel. So now I'm knitting the foot, and I've decided to keep the garter stitch pattern on top of the foot, and underneath I want to do it in stockinette stitch, so I can see how the colors come out and if it looks a lot different, whether it's stockinette or garter stitch. Yeah. But there's still quite a bit to do on that one. So these were the socks. Then on to some squares. I'm crocheting a cotton square with all those colors over here. And I've added a few more rounds to it. And I've also added 1 color that I'm not usually selling in my shop, but a friend of mine bought it and gave it to me because she started doing a blanket like this as well. And she bought She bought a handful of colors that I don't carry, but I just decided to use the one because I already have quite a few greens. But this one is so different from the ones that I have that I decided to pop it in here. And yeah, so I'll keep working on that. So instead of the 42 colors that I originally planned, I'm now planning on doing 44 because I've already added a yellow in that I don't usually have, and now I've added the green in, so we'll see with how many colors I end up in the end. So the next project I want to show you is my memory blanket, and I already showed you those 9 squares last week, and I hardly worked on it at all. I started a square yesterday, but I was so busy I didn't have the time to finish it. And at first I thought I wouldn't show you, and I'll show it next week if I've done more. But then I thought maybe someone who has never knit a square like that might be interested in seeing how it comes, how you do it. So if you add a square at the edge, you cast on a few stitches and you pick up stitches from the side of one of the existing squares. And in the beginning, you knit like this, so it looks all straight. But because of the decreases happening in the middle, it will end up looking like this. And I think it's quite funny to see how in the beginning, it all looks like very long and straight. And then later on, you get the corner just by doing the decreases. And that's how you get this, the way the lines are forming here. Yep, so I just wanted to show you that. And I hope to have more squares done by next week. Now my pants or trousers or whatever. The first one I'm knitting is called Mamelucker. It's I keep forgetting, I think it's a Swedish pattern, but that's translated into English, so you can get the English instructions on the internet. And this is Opal 4-ply sock yarn from the subscription where you get colors that you couldn't pick. It's always a surprise. And I'm knitting these shorts, and I'd already finished the first leg last week, and I've knit on the second one. I finished the stockinette part and I've started the ribbing, and now all I need to do is finish the ribbing. It's quite a few stitches, so it's not as quick as you might think, but yeah, it's something I don't have to think about anymore. So this is one of the projects that I can knit while concentrating on something else. With the other trousers, I'm also at a point where I don't need to think. That's the Känguruh Ox by Stephen West. I'm using 2 different DK weight sock yarns by Opal. I'll quickly show you. Oops. So one color is this one. That was called Reiselust, which means the love of traveling. And the other color is again a rainforest color, and I'm holding them double. And with so this is the front of the trousers, and for the back I will use different colors the same colors that I used for my pullover, for my kangaroo lover that's supposed to go with these trousers. So I've now finished the first leg. I haven't cast off because you're supposed to always put the stitches on hold, and you'll add an I-cord later when the rest is done, like the sides and the waist, and quite a few things still coming. But it was I had a bit of a hard time deciding how long I wanted the leg to be, so that took a while to decide. But now that I've decided, I just have to repeat the same thing on this side, and then I have to knit the same thing again for the back, and then attach all the other bits that I'll show you when I'm working on them. So that's that. And then my 2 pullovers. I have almost finished my Calibrate sweater that I am test knitting for spindles and stitches. And as I said last week, I wrote to Alex, the designer, and asked her about shortening the front, and she said that was okay, just to make sure it fits me. And so I finished the hip increases, and then I split the front and back. And then, because I'm fairly short, I started with the short rows straight away. And I'm very, very happy with the length that it has now and how it fits on me. And I finished the short rows in the stockinette part, and then you do the ribbing with short rows as well, which I think looks very beautiful. I like it very, very much. And now I started doing the back. And as I said, the back's supposed to be longer than the front. So I'm going to knit about 5 centimeters straight. And then I'll just do exactly the same short rows as on the front, and then it'll just be that bit longer, and it'll have the same lovely curve. And I'm really looking forward to finishing the sweater. I plan to finish it this week, so I hope that next week it'll be all done and washed and blocked and everything, and I can show it to you. And I hope to be able to send pictures where I'm wearing the sweater to Alex so she can finish her pattern. And as far as I know, she plans to publish the pattern end of February. So as soon as she publishes it, the link on my pattern page on Ravelry should get activated, and then you can go from my pattern page to her page and you can go and buy the pattern. It's really nice. So the other pullover I'm knitting is the Raglano, which we're knitting as a knit along on my in my Ravelry group and on my YouTube channel. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. It's a German pattern. I'm not quite sure whether there's an English version or not, but you can check that out. So this is another Opal DK weight sock yarn from the Rainforest line, and I just love the color. So I've added quite a bit on the front and back. I've put all the stitch markers in that I had in my Calibrate sweater because I'm doing the same kind of waist decreases on this pullover because I love them so much on the other one. And I'm not quite sure about the hip increases. I will have to do some, but I might do them differently because I've decided to knit a pattern once I get lower than the waist. And the same for the arms. I want to knit in stockinette to the elbow, and then I want to add a lace pattern that I've chosen that I want to try out. So what I usually do with these top-down pullovers, I finish the first ball on the front and back, and once that's knit up, I'll attach the next ball of yarn on one of the sleeves, and I'll first knit the sleeves, and when they're done, I'll finish the front and back. That way I don't have that much pullover to move around while I'm knitting on the sleeves. And also it means that when I'm knitting the first sleeve, I can try out the pattern and see if it works or not, and I don't have as many stitches if I want to undo it as if I tried it on the front and back. And I don't have to knit a gauge swatch just to try the pattern. Sleeves are always good gauge swatches if you measure correctly. If you don't, your jacket comes out differently than what you planned. So that's everything that I worked on that you've seen before, but as I finished a few things, I also started some new projects. And the first thing that I started knitting is a hat, and it's out of a German book with brioche knit hats. And I chose one of the patterns, but in the book it's a grey hat with a cable pattern, and I decided to do a 2-color brioche but keep the cable in it. And I'm using a DK weight sock yarn by Opal again. Last year I knit gloves out of that color, and there's lots of yarn left over, so decided to do the hat. And for the other color, for the gray, I'm using a merino yarn by Hansa Farm, which is a small German company in Hamburg. They have beautiful yarn, and so that's for the inside for the softness, and the other one is for the color for the outside. And the reason I wanted to do a brioche hat or knit some project with brioche is that I've wanted to learn to knit both colors at the same time. So the first things, I learned to knit 2-color brioche in a way that you knit one row with one color, and then you knit the same row with the second color, then you turn around, knit the second row with the first color and the second row with the second color. In the round it's easier because you do one round with one color and then the second round with the other color, and then you start over. But if you do both at the same time, it's a lot quicker, and that's what I wanted to try. And I used a video by the Sockomatician, and he explains it really well, and it works out fantastically. And now all I need to do is finish the hat, and I learned something new I can teach my students. So the next thing I started is another pair of these wrist warmers or half gloves or whatever, and I'm knitting the same pattern, but I'm using a different material. So this was a 4-ply sock yarn, and now I'm using alpaca lace yarn, which is really, really thin, and I've knit them before with 2 strands of lace yarn held together, and that worked out really nicely. But this time I'm using a mohair silk yarn as the second yarn. So those two together I figured should be about as thick as the sock yarn, and I think because of the mohair it's slightly bigger, so it comes out a little wider than the sock yarn ones, but it's still not too big, and it's still very stretchy and should fit different sizes nicely. And I'm knitting these for my sister's niece, who picked the color and the pattern and wanted to have them. And then there's one more thing I started. I have a subscription of Simply Crochet, the magazine, and they started a crochet along in their last issue, and it's a very crazy, colorful, bold design, and you can either crochet a blanket or a pullover. So what they're planning to do is for this issue and the next 9 ones, with each magazine you get part of the pattern, and you can so each issue will contain one motive that you can then crochet, and the pattern will tell you how many of those you need to crochet, either if you're making the blanket or if you're making the pullover. And I decided to do the pullover, and I've started this month's motive, and it looks like this. And these are the other 2 neon colors that Opal is dyeing on their DK weight sock yarn. You can also get the neons in the 4-ply, but they've been around a bit longer, and the DK weight neons are fairly new. And I've already used the green and the yellow, and now these are the other 2 colors. And then for the whole project you need 5 colors. And I'll be using the orange, the pink, the green and the yellow, and the black as the contrast color, the way they have it in the magazine. And then they use a blue yarn, and Opal doesn't have a blue DK weight yarn that fits with these colors. They have a light blue, jeansy color blue that's nice, but it doesn't fit with the neons. So I looked in my stash at home and I picked out this blue, and so the pullover will have the orange, pink, blue, black, and the green and the yellow, so not the red. It's a bit of a crazy combination, but it's almost exactly the same colors they have in the magazine. I think my yellow and the green are a bit lighter than in the magazine, but I think it'll be funny. I will be noticed then. Yeah, so that's the plan. This is not finished yet. It's just the beginning of the motif. I'm supposed to add 2 corners like this, and then it'll be a rectangle, and it'll get a few more rounds, like an edging around it. And once this motif is done, it's supposed to be half of a pullover, front or back. I think the pullover is reversible, and if you do the blanket, you have to crochet 2 of these. Yeah, but I think I'll be fine with the pullover. Yeah, so that's everything I knit and crocheted on last week. I hope you enjoyed seeing all these things and listening to what I have to say about them. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!